Modern farming has created modern sustainability challenges for farmers. This is due in part to the ever-growing human population, which is projected to reach 9.7 billion in 2050. One of the main issues of agriculture is desertification.
What is desertification? Okay.
Can you say that again, Josh?
What is desertification?
I'm glad you asked, Josh.
Elminger.
Desertification is when people exhaust the soil's nutrients through things like animal grazing, tree cutting, and excessive crop planting, causing the land to deteriorate, creating desert-like conditions, hence the name. I like that. That are not very productive when it comes to feeding large amounts of people. The Earth Policy Institute estimates that over 2 billion hectares of land have been degraded and desertified. Overgrazing is responsible for roughly 34% of desertification, deforestation for 30%, and various agricultural use for 28%. According to the UN, 27 million hectares of land become unfit for agriculture every year. That's about one Colorado's worth of land every year. Elevation of the land can cause problems for people farming that they have to adapt to. And soil at higher altitudes can have lower nitrogen concentrations. This gives crops a harder time growing. Another way geography inhibits the growth of agriculture is through the varying climates, which don't allow for all crops to grow. Wheat's not going to grow in the Sahara Desert, and rice isn't going to grow in the Midwest. Droughts can also destroy entire areas of crops. Droughts are events in where the soil and area are low in water, in which plants need to survive and grow. With no water, there will be no plants. An example of a prominent drought was in the 1930s, the Dust Bowl, which destroyed almost all crops in the Midwest and estimated that it had around 7,000 deaths. Too much water can also mean that the plants will not be able to grow. Areas like swamps will not be able to grow consumable crops as they don't have enough oxygen from the soil. Rocky soil, although it is possible to grow some crops in it, usually cannot grow consumable crops for the reason that it doesn't have enough nutrients. These plants can't root into it and cannot store as much water as a normal soil can, which means crops will not be able to survive. Okay.
Agriculture began around 11,000 BC when nomadic people started to shift away from the previous hunter-gatherer lifestyle into a lifestyle of planting and cultivating crops for food. The reason they had shifted away from this lifestyle is because hunter-gathering required them to move around constantly and they had to live day to day. But the cultivation of crops allowed them to stay in one area and grow crops for future consumption, moving away from the nomadic lifestyle. Due to them moving away from hunter-gathering, their population boomed, and they were able to create civilization itself with working governments and jobs, which were not available as hunter-gatherers. Eventually, people began to leave the Fertile Crescent, one hearth of agriculture, moving into the surrounding areas such as Egypt, Turkey, and Greece. The differing climates in these regions required them to begin innovating their agricultural methods. Surprisingly, this had also happened in northern China and Central America independently. Some civilizations that had also created agriculture independently include the Mayans and the Aztecs, which existed around 900 BC to 1521 AD, had floating gardens which they planted their crops on. The Yandi clan and the Huangji clan were northern Chinese clans that had developed agriculture for the first time in Asia. Agriculture is extremely important to us because without it, civilization itself wouldn't exist. We wouldn't have jobs, and for the most part, we would still be hunter-gatherers.
The Green Revolution was a period of time lasting from the 1970s to the 1980s in which many agricultural techniques were created and diffused. The two main advances were higher yielding seeds and fertilizers. The introduction of the Green Revolution caused agricultural productivity to increase more than population growth at the time. In the 1950s, a group of scientists started experimenting to create a higher yield variant of wheat. The experiments were successful and the miracle wheat seed was created. The head of the program of the father of GMOs, Dr. Norman Borlaug, was Nobel Peace Prize in 1970 for his advancement. These new miracle seeds prevented many regions in Asia and Latin America from having a food crisis during the 1970s. The miracle wheat caused India to go from importing millions of tons of wheat yearly to having a surplus of millions of tons of wheat. In Asia, a similar high-yield rice plant was developed. The rice was harder and had higher yields than the normal crop.
Finished. The second compartment is wheat. No! No! Dear wheat, you're pretty cool. I like flour and bread and all the products that come from you. As an American, I'm almost entirely reliant on your products for my food. Now that you're genetically modified, you're really resistant to all the droughts and storms that may come your way. Thanks to pesticides, nothing wants to touch you other than me. I love you, wheat, and I hope you love me back.
Okay.